So some of the things that we know about the types of people who are most likely to give you a bequest. So this is really a good way to start if you're just looking at your data, looking at your donor base right now and deciding who am I going to target for a bequest conversion pack, who am I going to ask if they would consider leaving a bequest. So no great surprises here, really. This is kind of a typical Dorothy donor type. So there's just the little questions popped up. Oh, that is a great question, Emily. I will get to that in a tick. Actually, no, I'll ask it now. So, bequest, gift, in wills, or legacy, which should we use? So this is actually a question which comes up a lot, and luckily for us, a lot of people have done a good research into this. So we actually know that the answer is gift in wills, leaving a gift. Bequest is apparently a little bit of an alienating word and something that people don't necessarily understand or have a bit of a negative feel about. Legacy is a little bit too broad. It doesn't really talk about the specifics of a gift in will. So because you can leave a legacy in many different ways, right? You can be a major donor and leave a legacy. We're going to talk a little bit more about other kinds of objections that people have you need to overcome in your copy for bequests. But that's a fantastic question, Emily, and thank you for asking that straight up. So as I was saying, the sorts of people that you want to target if you're just starting off or kind of starting to mine your own database for prospects, these sorts of people. Women over 55, people with no children, no surprises, just end up with a lot more money than people who have children. And those of you who, put kids through private school, for example, or even given them braces or whatever, will understand why that is. Obviously, people need to have a pretty positive attitude towards your charity, and that's the kind of information, it's obviously qualitative rather than quantitative generally, but things like surveys and how they interact with you, if they attend events, if they've tapped into your services a lot, that can give you a pretty good idea. And we'll talk a little bit later about scorecards. Obviously, if they've got a lot of assets, they may not even be cash rich at the moment, they may be on a pension, but they might have a lovely house in Paddington or Ponsonby or something like that. And particularly if they don't have much family, be more than willing to give you a nice generous gift in their will. No, pets is an interesting one. I guess that also makes sense. People tend to look after the animals and family or whatever who are the closest to them. So someone with no pets, no kids is obviously a pretty good target for giving a substantial gift to a cause that they are passionate about. Generally, people who've been supporting you for longer are better prospects, but a caveat there is that I've heard this so many times, up to 60 or 70% of people who leave you a bequest may not be on your database. You may never have heard of them. You have no idea who they are. They just comes totally out of the blue. Which is a reason to make sure that the bequest information you have on your website is clear and easy to find and downloadable. And so if someone's taking some information to their solicitor and wants to leave you a bequest, you're not putting any barriers in their way. Again, if they've supported you fairly recently, that's a good indicator given by credit card. And of course, the higher value, the better. This is just, as I say, some data indicators if you're starting off or really wanting to mine your existing database for some good prospects. And of course, you can build on this. There's no reason why younger people can't leave you a bequest, etc., or that people with kids, particularly depending on the type of organization you are not going to leave you a bequest, but this is a good place to start. Again, no great surprise that people are likely to update their will or make their first will at key milestones in their lives. Whether that's losing a spouse to divorce or death, moving out of their own home. My mother, who's been crying poor for decades, suddenly has got all this money in the bank because she sold the family home recently. So she's 86, probably got a few good years left in her still, but she's a prime prospect, excuse me, for leaving a gift in her will because she's really at that time of life where she's thinking about it. Apparently COVID really brought into sharp relief the sort of, I guess, the sense of mortality or the lack of control over many things in our lives, and the number of people who were searching how to make a will and actually doing it skyrocketed. So the last couple of years would have been a really good time to ask people to leave you a bequest. But what do they say? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. One of the things I learned fairly recently is that two things actually. One is that many people will update their will without actually looking at the original one, or the previous one rather. So I actually found that the case myself. I recently updated my will for various reasons, and I just ditched the original one. I didn't go and update it or put a codicil or anything. And one of the charities that I had left a gift to in my original will was ditched, and I added a different one. So it's even if someone says they have a will, even if someone says they haven't left a gift to you, that can change. And a lot of it comes down to how you communicate with them about the importance of that action. So what are some of the things that people kind of see as barriers as to why they would ever leave you a gift in their will? And these are just some of the things to keep in mind as you're drafting copy or writing to people to ask them to leave a gift, etc. This idea that really it's all about family. You want to make sure your kids and your grandkids, etc., are sorted out. Why would I, leave it to anyone else? A lot of people don't think about it. That's why we have that, include a charity campaign, Wills Week and things like that to kind of raise awareness across the board. My understanding is that there's a pretty small percentage of Australians who actually leave a gift in their will to a charity. So there's always scope to increase that number. There's also this idea that it's just kind of slightly mad, eccentric millionaires who, leave a gift to, or like leave their entire estate to some crazy cause that they're passionate about. Often people don't think that it's something they can do because they're not wealthy. So again, this is something we have to overcome when we're talking to people, that it's not about being massively wealthy. Any amount that you leave is valuable. And when you think about it, if someone suddenly out of the blue just gave you a cash gift of $10,000, you would consider them a pretty major donor or a very high value donor to be nurtured and thanked. So there's no reason why a $10,000 gift left in a will doesn't have that same massive impact. So again, just because someone someone's asked a great question. So what happened with a charity you ditched from your will? I want to know what not to do. I don't make the same mistake and lose a bequester. Well, it's actually interesting because I had two charities that I'd left a gift to, and I told them both. So my solicitor said to me, do you want me to inform them? And I said, yes. And I had also answered, I think, a survey for both of them saying, yes, I've left you a bequest. So one of them just ticked all the boxes in terms of, no, actually, one of them I had said to them, I'm thinking about it. So just over the course of 2 or 3 years, they just every now and then very gently might make a little phone call, send me an SMS, an email, just saying, hey, Dominique, you told us that you were considering this. Just checking to see if you've done it. It was very gentle, but it kept them top of mind. And then there was another organisation which I'd worked with, loved what they do. So when I came to make my will originally, the solicitor said, do you want to leave any gifts to charities? I was like, absolutely, named 2 of them. And then told that second one that I had in a survey that I had done so. And actually they never, look, it was obviously a data glitch. They never acknowledged it. Obviously something just got missed. But the funny thing was, actually, because I worked with them, I told the guy that I worked with and said, look, I'm sure it's just an oversight, but I did tick this box in the survey. I haven't got any acknowledgement. You might want to just check your processes and make sure you haven't missed anyone else. And I still didn't get a response. So, it might seem a bit petty, but when it came to, there's another charity that I also said to them, oh, look, I'm sort of thinking vaguely about maybe leaving you a gift. And they, again, were really good at communicating with me sort of steadily over time, so that when I sat down to do it, they were very top of mind. So that's really part of it. It's just keeping it in people's heads. And because people don't go back to their original will necessarily, if they made it 20, 30 years ago, say they got married, had a few kids, bought a house in their 40s, 50s, they make a will. They don't change it till they're 80. They're not necessarily going to remember if that charity was in there. And a lot of people do it a year or two before they pass, not necessarily on purpose. I don't know when they're going to go, but you know, it's never too late to just sort of put that idea in someone's head and keep it going. So yeah, really, really valuable. Thanks for that question. Anonymous, what do you recommend as a reasonable time interval between reminder calls and consider for doing? Look, I think about 6 months is good. 6 to 12 months. I mean, it tends to be a very long-term thing, right? So from me ticking that box in a survey saying, yeah, I'm thinking about it, to actually doing it, was at least 5 years, I think, at least 5 years. But it really meant that when I sat down with my solicitor, that charity was, you know, here, right in my frontal lobe. So thank you for all these great questions. Excuse me. Just lastly here with the barriers, a lot of people don't realize that there's flexibility. They kind of think it's an all or nothing. Either I leave you my whole estate and my family misses out, or I can't leave you anything. So again, communicating types of bequests is really, really critical. Before we get on to that, and I'm sure a lot of you know all about residuary and percentages and all that sort of stuff, but we will touch on that in a minute. I just want to talk about framing your bequest proposition, because it is a little bit different, or actually quite different, to your cash appeals or even your regular giving program. It's probably more in the vein of what you might do for a major donor or a high value donor. So you're sort of talking very big picture. It's all very visionary. You're not really asking them to support, you know, a specific program right now, because who knows in 10, 20 years time if that program will even exist or exist in the same way. So to my mind, you're really talking about the future impact of their gift, and it is about leaving a legacy. So while you wouldn't necessarily term the gift itself as a legacy gift, they are still leaving some kind of thing behind, right? So it's all about that, you know, even when you're not here, you're still having a massive impact. And I think that can be very powerful for people. And we're really talking about, you know, what's the cumulative outcome of all our hard work in 20, 30, 50 years? You know, are we trying to get to zero poverty? Are we trying to eliminate breast cancer? Are we trying to make sure that nobody has to go through dementia alone, et cetera, et cetera? So, you know, your cash proposition is all about saving a forest, excuse me, better cancer treatments now, supporting new mums so that their children have the best, you know, the best chance of a good future, etc. Bequests are all about looking forward to that best case scenario. You know, what are we actually striving for? A couple of random samples. Breast Cancer Institute, last time I looked anyway, they had Towards a World Without Breast Cancer, as I mentioned. Dementia Australia was A Future Without Dementia. Garvan Institute was more about contribute to the medical breakthroughs of tomorrow. And I guess that really speaks to that idea of a cumulative effect of scientific breakthroughs. So that idea that we're not really sure what's going to come next, but your gift, whenever it lands, will really contribute to those sort of things that we can't even imagine right now, but we know are coming, because we know that we build on that knowledge, and you can really be part of that. Lizzie says, for the end of the webinar, someone starting out in the bequest space, what additional reading or training? Excellent. I will get back to you on that, Lizzie. Okay, so just as a, for instance, this is a charity we worked on a while ago. They work in the vision space, and one of the things we did was to look at, well, who are their primary audience for a bequest ask, right? So because they're basically a service provider, they help people with the condition get support, get help, get referrals, get treatment early, often saving people's sight in the process. They also advocate, they do fund a bit of research, etc. So they have all these different arms of their organisation. So really, they're existing clients who tend to be on the older side. This is a condition which tends to manifest when people are in their 70s and 80s. So absolutely prime target audience. All the services are completely free. So you have sort of very grateful people who in some instances have had their sight saved, or at least their sight loss mitigated. So of course, if you go to them and say, look, can you help us in the future by leaving a gift, they're definitely going to be at least open to the idea. And then, of course, their family and carers, people who've seen firsthand the impact of the support that the charity's given their loved ones. And then to some extent, people who work in the field who, again, might know the organisation, be impressed by their work, have been helped in their career because, the treatments are getting better because of their advocacy, etc. So again, you really want to think about, well, who's my primary audience, and focus on them first. And then, of course, you might want to expand that out if you can, or at the very least, put a variable in your copy so that you're covering off different types of people. Excuse me. So the rationale for the bequest is that, look, they're already saving site, they're doing good work, they're supporting, or thanks to the support of the people in their community, stakeholders as well as donors. The long-term vision is that idea that no one should lose their sight to macular disease. So it's interesting, they're not trying to eradicate macular disease necessarily. They're not really seeing that in the first instance as a viable option. But it's like, okay, if people develop the condition, let's make sure that no one goes blind from it or loses so much of their vision that it really impacts their quality of life. So that became their bequest proposition, a world where no one loses their sight to macular disease. And then the call to action, of course, connects, as you see, the donor to the impact, to the big vision. It's not about help us ensure no one loses their sight. It's about help ensure, no one loses their sight because you've left a gift to this organization. What sort of elements should you be looking at? Absolutely, bequest stuff should be extremely well integrated. You should always have a good sort of digital program going as well as print. Of course, if you're dealing with DM responsive donors who are older, DM packs can work really well for bequests. You can put some lovely collateral together. Excuse me. Here we go. It's 20 minutes. 20 minutes in, and my voice starts to go. Yes, so definitely the letter is going to form the basis of your ask, whether it's a conversion or you've asked us. Oh, sorry, you've indicated you're interested. Let us know if you've done it, etc. Definitely should be someone fairly senior in the organisation, unless you have a bequest officer. But I think they should really be sending the welcome pack if you want them to be communicating or following up with people on the phone. Some kind of brochure that really talks to that vision that you have. You probably need a couple of these. So one is going to be the conversion, getting people on board, and then one is the welcome. And the welcome can really be much more, positive, uplifting. You don't have to go into that sort of admin-y stuff about, the wording for a will, right? Because someone has said, look, I've already left you a gift. So it doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to have lots of moving parts, but it should be consistent, and you need to have a little bit of a plan around timing, and definitely calling should be in there as well. One of the big things about bequests is that you often don't know someone's left you one until they die and you get a letter from the solicitor or a big check or something. Obviously knowing how many people have left you a bequest or are thinking about it is massively beneficial to, excuse me, long-term planning. And that's what you really should be saying to people. Look, if we know that you're intending this or have done it, it really allows us to plan for the future. And that's what they're supporting you for by leaving a bequest, right? A gift in the will. So, yeah. And, they have control. They can change their minds. But it's really good to make it very clear as to why you actually want to know this stuff. It's not just a matter of, ticking an admin box. It's actually really valuable to the organization. Not everyone has a name for the bequest program. Not everyone has a little pin or whatever. But it's not a bad idea to think of something if you can, if it's viable, if it's feasible. You don't want to spend too much crazy money on it for no good reason. But, anytime you can make your supporters feel a bit more like a part of a tribe, part of the cause, then that's all to the good. Again, don't discount your website. It can be so hard to find bequest information on charity websites. I don't understand why that's so, but don't make them dig through, support us, ways to support, and then bequest is kind of down somewhere on the page after cash gift, regular giving. It's kind of an afterthought. It really should have its own little section, a downloadable brochure if possible, easy contact form, etc., etc. Social media, no particular reason why you can't put bequest messages out on social. You might dedicate a week or a month every year to kind of really blasting out messaging around bequests. Dedicate your newsletter or part of your newsletter, big feature story, making sure that you're quoting people who have left a bequest to you about why they've done it. That peer sort of acknowledgement is really, really powerful as well. And then, of course, events are kind of, my understanding is like that bequest morning tea is a little bit out of fashion. And obviously in the last couple of years, it hasn't really happened much. But again, there's not so much you would necessarily have a specific bequest morning tea, but if you are having events and it's appropriate, no particular reason why you can't bring up the topic of bequests, particularly if the audience is in that sweet spot that we talked about before. My father had Parkinson's for many years, and I remember my mother talking about going to an event which was really like information and support about, newly diagnosed, and someone got up to talk about bequests there, and she was horrified because to her it was kind of equating, death with this condition, and she just thought it was a really bad timing. So, as a fundraiser, I totally get that they took that opportunity, but from her perspective, it was a little bit on the nose. So again, just, be sensitive, but don't be shy. L. Campbell is asking, will you get a copy of the presentation? Yes, this is being recorded. You'll get a copy of all of the presentation, and you get a copy of the recording separately, the presentation as well. So you can track back through this. No need to take crazy copies. Just very quickly, types of bequests. So you probably all know this, but it always bears repeating, this idea that people can leave the remainder after they sort out their family, or a percentage, which is kind of quite neat. It's just like 1% of my, excuse me, 1% of my estate. The good thing about that is that, of course, if someone passes away with a massive mansion on a hill, well, they may not have been very cash rich, or when they made their will, the property may not have been worth all that much. But over time, the suburbs gentrified or whatever it might be. So what they think they can afford to leave you, $20,000, actually, if it's like a 1% of a $2 million property, that's, how much is that? $20,000, $200,000. Never mind. You know what I'm trying to say. So that you can sort of end up with more than they think they were able to give you, because it's expressed as a percentage rather than a specific amount, which people still give. Obviously, I'll bequeath, $10,000 to Amnesty, whatever it might be. So that's kind of neat. I guess it's very specific. Not sure if that's less likely to be argued by the family, but people sort of have to do what they have to do. And of course, if someone wants to leave you their whole estate, all to the good. A bit more unusual, but of course it does happen. Just finally, before we, you've been asking some great questions as we go, so keep putting them in that chat box if you have them. But I will leave a couple of minutes at the end. Yeah, residual bequests are great. Or percentages. So you really want to encourage your donors, if they're not sure or whatever, just letting them know this is the most beneficial to the charity, if that's a consideration for them. As I say, their solicitor will no doubt give them some advice on that. But we do tend to nudge them in this direction if that makes sense. We talked before about, all those things you should be looking out for. People with, no children, no pets they've given to you in the last 18 months, etc. So you can create a bit of a scorecard. So if you can't afford to send, a bequest conversion pack to your entire database, start to just do it in little segments and see how you go with that. Also taking into account how many resources you have internally to follow up, because you really do need to follow up with people. Speaking of which, making sure that you are kind of regular with your communications around bequests. Every time you send a survey, have a bequest question in there. If they've indicated to you that they have left you a bequest, then by all means laser that question so they get a different type of question. For example, you've told us that you've left us a bequest. Thank you so much. would you be willing to share why you've done that? And then you've got someone you can interview about, why they've made that decision. This is so important. If the person writing the letter or someone on your board or the CEO, whoever, has themselves left a bequest, then for goodness sake, make sure that they put that in their letter. Because if, how much more credible is it if I can say, I sat down with my husband and we discussed it and we've left a gift to this amazing charity that I work for. I'm inviting you to join me to do the same. It just makes sense that if putting my money where my mouth is, right, can be very powerful. And it's amazing how many CEOs or board members wouldn't think of it or wouldn't dream of leaving you a bequest. And you have to kind of think about where their loyalties lie in that instance, I think. People will say they're intending or they've done it, but they haven't really. So, always good to kind of check and see if people have actually done it. If you're lucky, the solicitor will confirm for you. That's what mine did. I understand, or at least I asked them to, which can be very good as well. Definitely consider some sort of bequest society. As I was saying before, it sort of gives people that sense of being part of a group, part of a tribe, which can be very powerful. Excuse me. Yeah, and then you have to kind of work at it. It's not just asking them once and then they don't do it and you never, and never do anything again. Make sure you have just consistent, like you would do with, your regular giving retention, like you would do with a major donor. Make sure you've got a bit of a donor journey in place that you stick with. And just before I answer those couple of little questions that are lingering there in the Q&A, the thing to remember, and this is something that I heard at a conference, and I can't remember who gave the talk, but they were someone who does a lot of research in the bequest space. The main reason people give us a bequest is because we actually ask them to. So just relying on people to kind of think of it themselves, even as I said before, a lot of people who do leave you a bequest, you don't know them. So it's not the only reason people will leave you a bequest, but if you ask them, they're much more likely to do it. Kind of makes sense, really. So let me just have a quick look. Would you also encourage general bequest rather than specific bequest, i.e. to research? Judith, that is a fantastic question, because again, if we're looking at the long-term, like long-term vision, you just don't know what research project you're going to have in the pipeline, right? So the more specific a bequest is, the trickier it can be to what do you call it? To respect that person's wishes. So it kind of depends on who they are, how old they are, if they're known to you. You definitely want to have a conversation, and you definitely would want to have some wording in there that gives you a bit of leeway. And one thing that is happening a lot in the US, of course, they have this extraordinary philanthropic culture over there, is people doing what's called, I think, a living bequest or a living legacy, where you can actually encourage people to kind of give. It's essentially a major donor or a high value thing, right? But encourage them to give something to you now for a specific project, plus, a larger gift in their will, for example. So that is going to tend to be quite high net worth individuals, etc. But yeah, you have to be, I think, quite careful. Excuse me. Of letting people get too specific. I remember a story, years ago I heard, where someone had left, like maybe in the 1950s, they had left, I think their entire estate or a very substantial amount of money, millions, to the polio society or something. And of course, by the time they died and their will was read, polio had been eradicated in Australia. And so that organisation didn't even exist, I don't think, or not in that form. And there was a real concern, like there was an issue around, well, where does the money go? And I suspect they didn't have any family to sort of sort that out. So and that's a bit different because it's an organisational thing. But you don't want to get too specific. Anonymous, another great question. Where does that statistic come from? I can't remember. There are a lot of people doing a lot of amazing work in this space, a lot of amazing research. A good place to start would be with Richard Radcliffe. I believe he's actually going to be speaking in New Zealand in the next couple of months. He has a website with extraordinary amount of downloadable resources. Start there. Richard Radcliffe, R-A-D, like Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter. Yeah, that Radcliffe. So definitely start there, and I'm sure he'll have lots of other tips and tricks and links to other things as well.